Do you guys have impersonators or AI scammers or?
Jonte Charles, nice to meet you, Jonte. We only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to kind of dive right into it. Let's cover time constraints. We have 30 minutes for the interview. We have 5 questions for you. So roughly 3-minute responses. You know, you can give or take how you wish. 5 minutes for the introductions, which we're in the middle of. Gotcha. And then, 5 minutes for Q&A towards the end. The timeline for our decision, we have 6 candidates that we're interviewing for this position, and we expect to have an answer back to suppliers by Tuesday of next week. So pretty quick turnaround, and depending on your availability or the candidate's availability, positioning them on the team very soon, right? ASAP type of thing. So, okay, those are the timelines. A couple expectations. One, the expectation here is that you don't use AI during the interview. AI is used at work, and the candidate can certainly use that during professional time at work. But during interview questions, we kind of really need to know what you know, right? And so we ask that that's an expectation. Another one, if you're offered the position, an expectation would be that you'd be on camera at every meeting that we have as a team. So before we move on, I just want to make sure you're comfortable with those 2 expectations before we interview.
Correct.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, then let's jump into the introductions. First, I'd like to introduce the company that we work for. We work for a for-profit company, a subsidiary. It operates in the commercial diagnostic testing industry, so lab tests, and the sector is esoteric testing. So what that is a fancy word for saying very specialized testing. We don't want baby blood spots, right? We want your very difficult testing that you can't do at your local hospitals or your local laboratories. That's the type of volume we're looking for. Just to expand on that a little bit more, we are in the middle of a very large capital project to migrate to cloud-first technology, specifically GCP. Right? With that being said, we'll go ahead and introduce the team. My name is the senior software engineer for the infrastructure as code team, and this is the rest of the team. We have one of the software engineers on the team, another software engineer, and then who's our lead, our team lead and chief facilitator for the team as well. Okay, I wanted to rush through that because that's just the housekeeping stuff. Now let's get to the fun stuff. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jonte Charles. I've been in the cloud space almost 8 years or so now, but I have a software development background. I just didn't like it. I built my first application many moons ago and I realized I just did not like it. But in that realization, I realized that I was more fascinated about how apps actually run and scale. So even if you did build the next Facebook or Tinder, etc., how would you scale that to 100, 1,000, 100,000, etc.? And that's what got me fascinated about the cloud space. And in doing so, that is also what led me to do a deep dive on all 3 of the cloud service providers, which is why I have all of those certifications, because I wanted to understand the differences between the offerings. But nonetheless, me interviewing with you today isn't a mistake. It's just a conglomerate of decisions that I've made over the years to get opportunities as such. But it's nice to meet you. Love to know what you guys got going on and how I can add value to what you're trying to build.
Same here. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I tried my hand at the software development space too for many years, and we'll talk about that later. Let's dive into the questions. Question number 1, sir. Cloud Run Service is triggering alerts for a spike in 400 errors. What are a few things that you would check first to start narrowing down the root cause?
I would take a look at what the predominant monitoring tool is associated with capturing those occurrences. So if it's cloud logging, if it's Datadog, if it's Splunk, etc., I would take a look at those logs first and then try to understand what the Cloud Run is executing. Is it a Lambda script? I mean, not a Lambda script, but is it a Python script, etc.? What does that code look like? How frequently is it happening? But I would go in that order. So logging tool first, then actually take a look at the Cloud Run service itself to look at the Cloud Run logs, and then take a look at the script that's actually running within Cloud Run.
Fantastic. Any follow-on questions there, team? All right. I said that's what I would do. Right, exactly. No, that's good. All right, on to question number 2.
Okay, Jonah, so you mentioned you have a good amount of experience with the cloud. Could you tell me what the purpose of a Terraform state file is?
Yeah, so the Terraform state file is to be the ledger for what Terraform is managing or has knowledge of managing. So when you provision or manage resources with Terraform, they're going to be found in your state file along with other potentially important metadata. But that's going to be used as your ledger for yourself and for Terraform to understand what the desired state of your infrastructure should be.
And could you tell me some of the commands that will actually change the state file?
The first piece of those commands will be Terraform state and then input the remainder of the command there. It's not something that I frequently use, so I don't remember, but it would start with Terraform state and then input the third piece of the command afterwards.
I'll ask one follow-up question. Where would be a good place to house a state file so that it's secure but accessible?
So that would be dictated by your enterprise configuration for it. If you're using something like Terraform workspaces, you can persist your state there. However, if it's going to be persisted on a cloud platform, best practice would differ depending on the cloud platform. So for Azure, it would be blob storage with private endpoints with specific state files for the associated environment / team. For S3 on the AWS side, it would be S3 once again with a private endpoint, potentially using DynamoDB along with it. And for Google Cloud Storage buckets, it would also similarly be a Google Cloud Storage bucket with a private endpoint associated with it as well.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you. Okay, I think I have the next question. Do you have any experience authoring Terraform modules? And if so, can you talk about some of the design decisions that went into that to make it both reusable and secure?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have authored modules and they are generally built on the use case of the team that's requesting the conglomerate of services associated with it. So most recently, I was working on a Cloud Postgres and Cloud SQL module on GCP. And it's not for my team, it's for the team that we're supporting that's deploying those services. Generally, in my experience and in my opinion, I think your modules should be simple, readable, and they should always have documentation and examples associated with it, as well as a specific team or designated team for updates to the module, capturing the different version iterations over time. However, in my opinion, generally, you want to start with the minimal, simple requirements for you to deploy the objects and then iterate through there based on the needs of the team deploying the services.
Thank you. So the next question I have is related specifically to GCP. When would you use a service account versus a user account?
So you would use a service account when you're executing a service or a predominantly and frequently used tool in the environment. For instance, if I'm about to execute a pipeline, I would want to have a service principal or a service account to be the designated account to kick off that action. You would want to use those for other similar types of scenarios where you're using a widely used tool by a lot of teams. So you can mitigate the blast radius. You potentially even want to have service accounts scoped to particular environments / teams. And your user accounts would be for, I would say, more for individual related things, like actually logging into the portal. You use your user account, elevate into a particular role potentially, but your service account should be mapped to specific actions that are going to be widely used among a lot of teams for generalized action.
As a follow-up to that question, are you familiar with the term the principle of least privilege? And if so, can you describe what that is?
Correct. So least privilege is granting the minimal amount of, I'm using actions because I'm thinking like AWS, but the minimal required permissions to perform the minimal required actions to get something done. So you just want to give someone the very least amount of opportunities to mess up, so to speak. You just want to give them enough to do what they need to, and that's all.
Exactly right. Thank you.
Hey, the last question we have is specifically related to your experience with GCP. Can you just tell us about your experience using GCP? For example, what APIs have you used the most? What deployment methods have you used?
Right. So as far as APIs, at this point, I would say they will range depending on the services requested by the teams. For sure, the list of services that I've dealt with at this point, GKE, GCE, Cloud Run, Cloud Scheduler, Cloud SQL, Postgres, and these are deployed in conjunction with Terraform, Terraform modules, and GitLab is the pipeline solution. And of course, there's other pieces like the networking, like the actual VNets, subnets, etc. But I don't really count those as services since they're so generic. However, that's the style. So it would be a Jira ticket or larger project request for a set of services. And based on the ticket, my team would either build the modules associated with the services or deploy the infrastructure associated with the request or guide the team who's using the modules to deploy the infrastructure. And generally that'll come with a change request or process depending on the level of the environment. But it is following a Git flow methodology as well too. So we're still having our standard PR, MR reviews, and then the change request on top of it before we deploy anything during the particular change window.
I have one question. You answered in two different responses about using Cloud SQL Postgres. How did you implement? How did you grant users access to the database and the instance? Like, what was your methodology?
That's what we're working on now to improve. I don't have a solution for that yet. We're trying to work with the team that's requesting that module update to figure out a more efficient way to do it. I'm not by any means a database person either, but we particularly have our hands tied on updating the pipelines because of segregation of duties. My thought process was to have an individual stage within the pipeline that assigns the permissions outside of Terraform. But because we can't manage the pipeline ourselves, because that's another team's job, I'm thinking like, I don't want to, but we could potentially use Terraform provisioners to get that done. Like that's actually possible based on the Terraform documentation as the last resort, right? But we don't have a solution for that right now, just based on the constraints that we have in the environment.
Kicking butt on these questions. Do you have any questions for us?
Yes. Do you guys have impersonators or AI scammers or something? Is that frequent?
Impersonators or AI scammers in terms of like, we hire a contractor and they're not who they say they are?
Correct.
Yeah, all the time.
Wow.
Yeah. That's one of the expectations is we'd like to have you on camera. We see your face here. Mm-hmm. You don't give us the old switcheroo. You interview very well and your neighbor down the street actually, takes the money and shows up. We've had that case before. But there are a number of safeguards here.